Great day, everyone. Ed Dudley coming from Durham, North Carolina on this amazing day. And I'm excited. I normally call her my girlfriend, but what I found out is that she's got many boyfriends across the world. So I thought I was the only one, but I'm not. So good day, good afternoon, good morning, Charmaine.
Oh, my boyfriend. You are my best boyfriend. I mean, you're the only one that I have this chemistry with, right? And have these amazing conversations. So you are my only favorite boyfriend.
That's like coming in second in a beauty contest.
I'm blessed to be around some incredible people. And we're chatting to one of the most awesome men that I know in a few minutes. So you can understand the reason I'm allowed to cheat with people's minds, brains, and attitudes, right?
Exactly. I mean, when I looked up this individual's accomplishments in his CV, I was just like, oh my God, I can't wait to bring him in. And I just want to just sit and just listen and glean from his knowledge and things like that. So I'm ready to just bring him in and just get the conversation started. You ready?
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. I'm so excited. He's the only guy that I know. He's a doctor, professor, judge, author, director, chairman. I mean, there's any title you can actually. Hello, Judge King. Welcome.
Hello.
Good day, sir. How are you on this beautiful day?
I'm fine, thank you. And you?
We are. Well, I'm excited that you're in our presence. I'm excited for the wisdom that you are going to land with our listeners. I was just wondering, I mean, you've chatted in over like 60 countries. Is there a continent that you did not speak in?
No.
So that's a yes. You spoke in every single continent in our world. I mean, how incredible is that?
I have.
Oh. So Judge King, the reason we're very grateful for your time, your energy, your wisdom, and I know how precious your time is. So today's conversation is, the Ubuntu Connected podcast is largely to showcase incredible people doing great things. And I mean, you are the king of corporate governance. In my view, one of the best corporate lawyers that I know. Yeah. I mean, you've been a judge. So your wisdom, experience is, I can't compare you to anybody. Let's be real about it, right? So Ed and I are battling as to where do we actually start. But I'm just going to hand over to Ed, and then you can just take us to a few things and why. I overtalk. I'm so excited. The point I'd like for you to land is, why are you so crazy about corporate governance?
You know, as I just look at some of the stuff, I mean, you're senior counsel and former judge of the Supreme Court of South Africa, a professor extraordinaire on corporate governance. I mean, I don't even know where to start with you, other than, you know, you talked in 60 countries across the globe. What was your favorite country to actually speak in?
I can't say I have a favorite country in which to speak, but I've enjoyed seeing the world, and in the last 2 years with the pandemic, I've seen the world virtually again, all over again. Sometimes I'm up 5 o'clock in the morning doing presentations in Asia, and 11 o'clock at night I'll be doing a presentation on the east coast of America or something. So I have, in the last 3 years virtually, I think traveled as much, if not more, than I traveled in my whole life, because with the amazing ability with high tech that you can actually move around the world and share wisdom. And so it's been an exciting journey for me the last 3 years. And I've been called the rock star of corporate governance, acknowledged as one of the world authorities on corporate governance. So that's in answer to Charmaine's question. And my interest in corporate governance is that professionally I was a corporate lawyer, focused on corporate law. And then I went into business, and I didn't like what I was seeing in business. And I was actually approached by the Institute of Directors in South Africa would I form a committee and write about what is good governance, what is good corporate governance. And I said, let me think about it, because I was the chair of some very large companies. My time was pretty occupied. And I got a call from Mr. Mandela. I knew Mr. Mandela before he went into jail, and while he was in jail, I chaired an organization called Operation Hunger with his daughter, and we fed about 2.5 million children every day for about 17 years, and through that organization. And so when he came out of jail, we also continued speaking. In fact, we had a lunch for 12 people, and I was privileged to be one of the 12. And he went around the table, and he always called me Judge King. I have other titles, like Charmaine. She always calls me Judge King. She'll never call me Professor or anything else. But he says if it wasn't for Judge King, there'd be millions of our fellow citizens who would be useless people, because if you don't feed a child at the age of 3, their brains atrophy.
Yeah.
And they become useless people. So, and I told him when he phoned me that day to chat to me about something. We had great prescience. He was concerned about our education system, which he was absolutely right. And then I told him about this approach for me to do something about governance and write about what is good governance, particularly for South Africa. But then it went global. But I said I've been approached. He said, do it, you're the right man. And well, if you hear that from Mr. Mandela, who was then president, I'm talking about. No, he wasn't yet president. It was 1992. So he became president in 94. So, but he'd been released from jail, and he spoke to me, and well, we all knew he was becoming president. And he said, do it, you're the right man. And I started writing about what is good governance. And at the time, there was a principle which stemmed from the middle of the 19th century, right through the 20th century, exacerbated by Professor Milton Friedman of Chicago, who wrote his thesis that the sole purpose of the limited liability corporation is to make profit, as long as it keeps within the rules of the game, and to make profit for its owners, the shareholders. And directors should operate according to the design of the shareholders. Well, I never agreed with that. So I had an opportunity now to write about it. And I was critical of the fact that the shareholder is one of the stakeholders. I think the corporation, there are many stakeholders. And to say that the director's duty was to increase the wealth of shareholders, on the premise that the wealth would trickle down to the impoverished at the bottom, was a false thesis. In fact, the treacle became treacle and stuck at the top. And not only did it stick at the top, but directors' duties in the common law was clear, and yet it got mixed up during the 20th century through a famous case called it was the Ford Motor Company Limited and the Dodge Brothers, famous American case, where the court said the shareholders are the owners of the company. And the Ford Motor Company that year, 1919 it was, had made excessive profits of $65 million. And Mr. Henry Ford, the then chair of the company, said we're going to use those excessive profits to improve the plant and machinery to make them more efficient. And we're going to increase the wages of our employees, to encourage them to work longer hours, to meet the demand for our Model T Ford. The Dodge brothers were then a minority shareholder and later became a competitor. Said you can't do that. We are the primary shareholders and we are the primary stakeholders and we're the owners of the company as a shareholder. And you've got the majority of that special profit you have to declare as a dividend to the owners, the shareholders. They went to the Supreme Court in Michigan, and Michigan upheld that offer. So already in the 20th century, you had a judgment of the Michigan High Court, and then that, as I said, was exacerbated by Professor Friedman, who said the sole purpose of the company is to make profit, forgetting that in the middle of the 19th century, wealthy families gave capital to start businesses on an unlimited liability basis. So when the business failed, the wealthy family was still liable to creditors, to employees, and they started balking against us. They said, we're just not going to do this anymore. The government of the day, which was the representative of the people, society, said, well, conceived this idea, why don't we create an artificial person and give it limited liability? So you make a contribution of capital and we'll give you a share certificate, hard copy in those days, saying you've got, let's say there were 1,000 shares in the company, we'll give you and they $1 each, you apply for 100 shares, it's $100. And the $100 goes into the coffers of the company, and that's the capital, working capital the company uses to start its business. And, then those shareholders could sell on the shares to somebody else. But the concomitant of the shareholders having no duty or responsibility to this artificial, incapacitated person that had and has no heart, no mind, no soul, and no conscience.
We do need people with heart, mind, soul, and conscience.
That when the business fails, they go to the back of the line after creditors, after employees, and if there's any residual value, then they get. That was the concomitant, that was the deal. So you see, it was created by society, for society. So just on historical reasons, Milton Friedman was wrong. He was also wrong that in the majority of cases of profit, the profit is being subsidized by society and the environment. And we know that the degradation of the environment by the 1980s was a critical issue. And by the end of the century, we'd reached ecological overshoot, which is a technical term for that we, and in the main, limited liability company, had used and were using natural assets faster than nature was regenerating it. Clearly not a sustainable matter. And so you just couldn't carry on business as usual. So when I formed this committee, which was very representative of our new South Africa.
I just want to interject, Judge King. For the listeners, this committee is the King Committee, named after the famous Judge King.
Named after.
Is that the King?
Famous.
Is that the King report? Is that
the King
yes,
report? Yes,
you're speaking to the man.
Yeah. And so I said, and I'm paraphrasing because you can read King 1, it was published in 1994. I said that the primacy of the shareholder is a misconception because directors owe their duty to this artificial, incapacitated company that's got no mind of its own. Mm. The thinking comes from its corporate leaders, its directors. And the common law was quite clear in the 19th century when the architecture was created that the shareholders appointed directors will You will understand in those days the wealthy families appointed members of their family as directors.
Yeah.
So other stakeholders, particularly employees, says, well, these are the owners of the company. And so it became sort of the dialogue of the day, owners of the company, and then Michigan Supreme Court used that phrase. Milton Friedman used the phrase. Well, ownership, Ed, you've got a pen in front of you or a pencil. It's your property. You can break it, throw it out the window. You can give it to me. You can give it to Charmaine. You can go and burn it. You can do what you like to it. It's yours. When you are a shareholder, you cannot, in the days when we had cash registers, you cannot go, assuming you were even 100% share, you couldn't go and open that and take $5 out of the till. It's a theft. Why? Because the money is not yours, it's the company's money.
Yeah.
And the only way the shareholder could get money was if the board decided to pay a dividend to shareholders. And then the dividend could only be paid if there was sufficient liquidity for the company to pay its creditors and then to pay the dividend to shareholders. So a very strange kind of ownership, that you couldn't use the assets, you couldn't do what you liked with the assets, you had no proprietary right whatsoever to the assets. So it was a funny kind of ownership, wasn't it? That wasn't ownership at all. You owned that incorporeal, intangible right to a share of profits if the board declared a dividend. Otherwise, you never got a penny back. Right. So this is what I wrote, and I said what directors have to do is learn and understand the needs, interests, and expectations of the various stakeholder groupings pertinent to the business of the company, and then make a business judgment call in the best long-term interest of the health of the company.
Yeah.
And if the board gets that right, long-term, it's in the best interest of all the stakeholders. Because at the time when you make that decision, invariably you will benefit one stakeholder more above another, but these things, correct themselves in there. Because if you think about it, if Charmaine, you and I are the three directors, and we actually consistently make business judgment calls which are in the best long-term interest of the company, that must be in the best long-term interest of the company stakeholders and for society and for the environment. So companies are being subsidized by the environment. For example, if we were three directors just focused on increasing the wealth of shareholders, we'd build our new factory on the banks of a river, discharge our waste directly into the river, no expense in getting rid of the waste. But we were creating a planetary problem for every other person on planet Earth. And so these profits were subsidized by society and the environment. And today, the question is asked not how much money has the company made. Because of that thinking, which eventually went around the world and now is global thinking about companies. But people started asking, how has the company made its money? Because if it's made its money by further adversely impacting on planet Earth, which has got huge problems for your grandchildren.
Absolutely.
Well, then that company should not exist. And what is happening through social media, that company is losing support from customers, etc. So today, the question is, how has the company made its money? And people think of what inputs went into the company, how did the company operate? Every company creates waste. What does it do with its waste? Is it creative? Does it use its waste to create energy, for example? What does it do with its waste? That's an output. The output is also its product. The product goes out into society, obviously at a margin, because you've got to service your borrowings, pay your wages, etc., etc. But when that product goes out into society, it has an impact on society and the environment. And the question is it a positive or a negative impact? So let me take the famous Coca-Cola case. When 10 years ago, I think it was about, when an organization in the USA alleged that the reason for the obesity of our children is Coca-Cola. And, well, this gathered momentum. And Mexico, for example, slapped a tax on Coca-Cola. Our country is considering it, sugar tax. Coca-Cola said it doesn't, but don't worry, we're going to make a Coca-Cola with no sugar in it at all.
Actually.
I'm sure you drink Coke Zero. So, or Coke Light. But look at Coca-Cola. It was 120 odd years old. It had the most valuable brand in the world at that stage, and then up to that. And it focused just on its brand from a marketing point of view. All of a sudden, there was this mindset change because they realized their product was having an impact on society, and society was having a say in about their product. And so the mindset of the whole world changed. And today, the world thinks on an outcomes basis. What is the outcome of my product when it goes out of the society? What is the impact and what are the outcomes?
Sure.
And you start making your business judgment calls on that basis, because if you don't, then from a business point of view, you can actually fail in your duty of care to the company. And I gave a talk on Australian Broadcasting Corporation about the innocent company. So do you realize the company is incapacitated, artificial, it's got no heart, no mind, no soul, no conscience. And by definition, one-month-old baby can never be guilty of doing something wrong. The company is always innocent. It's corporate leaders that are not conscious corporate leaders. And with the wrath of society shouldn't turn against the company, must turn against its corporate leaders.
Corporate leaders,
Absolutely.
And the corporate leaders must change.
Yeah.
So they think correctly.
Sure. Judge King, Ed has a question quickly.
Yeah, so, I think it was 2006, 2007, B Corps became an entity. Do you have any thoughts on B Corps? Because I know that you're starting to see a lot of companies in the United States form as B corporations.
Well, in my judgment, B Corps were quite a necessary reform, because in the United States, the law is also very clear that directors owe their duty to the company and not to shareholders. 18 months ago, the board of the top 100 companies, round table of 100 companies, I think it's called, actually made a public statement. We've been wrong to focus on acting in the best interest of the shareholders. We've got to act in the best interest of the company.
Yeah.
For the benefit of all its stakeholders. Well, then they started talking about stakeholder capitalism. And I said, well, what are you saying? That the board must act in the best interest of all the stakeholders? The company will go bankrupt. You meet the interests of the employees, this one and that. But you take account of them as a matter of fairness. That's Ubuntu. Human virtue.
Yeah.
I agree.
I am because you are. And therefore, you make those, you take account of their needs, interests, and expectations, and then make the decision in the best long-term interest of the company. It's a matter of fairness. You explain to the stakeholder who has been prejudiced by this decision that, well, that was in the best interest of the company. Next year we'll make, or next month we'll make a decision. But it's our duty to make a decision in the best long-term interest of the health of the company. And do you understand that if we get that right, it's in your best long-term interest?
Absolutely. Judge King, you've said so many beautiful things. I just want to capture a couple of the exciting and incredible things you said, right? I mean, Nelson Mandela was not president at the time, but he realized the value that you bring, and he called you into his offices to ensure that you're going to take our country in a direction from a
on the phone.
yeah. The point is, from a governance perspective, and give us that governance, accountability, move our country forward in a favorable way that's going to look after all of us. You spoke about Coca-Cola and product, right? But what your initiative and report actually done, it was just not product. You added 3 more P's to it: people, planet, profits. Because before it was just profits and product. Now it's about what is it that you're doing for your people over and above your stakeholders, and what is it that you're doing for the planet. Because I remember sitting in your lectures. I know Judge King for more than half of my life. I remember listening to all of your talks, and the reason I am the way I am and the way I do care and consider things over and above profit is because he planted the seed in me on multiple levels, in the lecture halls, in the boardrooms, in other engagements. So I'm eternally grateful for you from that perspective. But what you've done, not just here in South Africa, is just created a heightened level of awareness as to what people need to think about more than profits. And if we did this in the 80s, we would not be in the position we currently are, right? Climate change, the ridiculous floods, the pollution. And your paper, your research, your King report has done incredible work, but we need to do so much more. What do you think is failing us? I mean, you've written all the 6 books. You do these talks over and over again. Some people listen and act and some don't. What do you think is failing us as humanity?
Well, there are 2 things that drive markets and drive decision making in the corporate world. It's greed and fear. Those are the 2 factors. And when you're fearful, for example, you start selling shares. And when you think there's going to be a rise in the price of the shares you buy, there's greed. Greed is one of the corporate sins, because a director must cross that Rubicon of intellectual honesty, leave behind him or her past experiences, present needs, wash the brain, clean the tabula rasa, cross the Rubicon of intellectual honesty, go to that boardroom, listen, and then make that decision in the best long-term interest of the health of this incapacitated person that's so dependent on you and has such a huge impact on our society. The most important citizen in the US and in South Africa is the limited liability company, because it is the platform on which capital is raised. It's the platform on which jobs are created. Mm-hmm. It's the platform of success for politicians. If business is doing well, President Biden, his popularity will go up more. You remember Reagan's famous statement, "It's the economy, stupid." But
he was right, though, right?
It's the economy, not profit at any cost.
Yeah.
Because now people have realized that we will, and it was in the 80s, by the way, the Brundtland Commission, that by 1987, Brundtland issued the famous statement and said the economy, society, and the environment, and called it the 3 Ps, people, planet, and prosperity. And said that unless we adopt and look at things in making business judgment calls through the 3 prisms of the 3 Ps, then people who come after us, those who come after us, will not be able to have a sustainable life, sustainable development themselves. Because, I mean, the expedited research of the 3rd industrial revolution of the computer age of the 70s showed by the end of the 20th century, moving into the 21st century, that we were using natural assets faster than nature was regenerating them. Were clearly not sustainable. So we had to, there had to be a change in the way we were operating. And we were doing things, how we made our money was adverse to the planet and adverse to society. How many companies were actually prepared for the COVID pandemic? How many companies had health and safety regulations which actually protected their employees properly? suddenly the S of the ESG, environmental, social, and governance, stuck its head up, and corporate leaders started paying attention to the well-being of their employees.
It's always been the tick box. It's like, are we doing it? We tick the box. So with the King report before, it's more principle based. So you don't tell them what to do. It's they need to do what is ethically correct on those multiple levels, right? But
my striving is that governance became rules and principles, but it became tick box, mindless.
Yeah.
You have a remuneration committee, you have an audit committee, you have this committee, so all the things you can think of in corporate governance, and you tick them off. But you get some underling in the company, Joe blogs, and say, Joe, make sure we've got everything here, and you issue what I call a green wishing or greenwashing report. And you say, we've followed how many companies you said we follow the King report and everything, and the next 2 months time they liquidated and there's a fraud or something. So in writing the reports, I realized it had to become mindful. There had to be application of mind to it. So I said there are 4 outcomes, that unless you're achieving these 4 outcomes, you're failing in your duty of care to the company. And that was value creation in a sustainable manner. Adequate and effective internal controls, the functions inside the company, internal audit, company secretary, etc., etc. Trust and confidence in the society in which you are moving, that legitimacy of operations. As soon as there was a doubt of the legitimacy of operations, companies failed. Example, Oversight. So it's very easy. Ethical culture with effective leadership. Ethical culture is something internal. How we do things around there when no one is watching us. External stakeholders look at characteristics of a company. So you've got a South African culture, Charmaine, but you've got characteristics. Same. The company is a person. We've got a culture, how we do things around here when no one's watching us. But the external stakeholder sees characteristics and can then draw a conclusion, rationally, hopefully, that the company is a responsible corporate citizen, that it's acting in a responsible manner, that it's making profit, healthy profit, and not adverse to society and the environment, people and planet.
Sure.
So thinking became, and I changed the mindset. In 2012, I got a gold award they called it a gold award, from the International Federation of Accountants. It's on my CV there, you'll see. That I changed the thinking of the accountancy profession forever. As I said, it's not only numbers. You are taught about these critical issues. You are the steward of business information.
Absolutely.
Stewardship embraces honesty, virtue, and
the courage to do right.
And courage to do the right thing. Courage
Absolutely.
is one of the great attributes of the good director. And so you must become mindful. And what I said about accountants is, I wrote my book that chief financial officers become a misnomer, because the accountant doesn't sit in his corner office. They're drafting the financial statements to make sure it complies with financial accounting standards, board standards in the US, or international accounting standards, board standards here in South Africa. And the external auditor comes around and checks that you've complied with the standards. They're not there, to give canine examples, they're not bloodhounds to sniff out fraud. There mustn't be lapdogs taking your instructions and you stroking them so that they do what you want them to do. There's watchdogs to watch, to make sure you're complying with these standards in your financial management. That's why there is this expectation gap between the general members of society and the external audit. It also drove me to write another book, External Audit, Quo Vadis, where to? Where are you going? Because only 20% of the market cap of companies was represented as additives in balance sheets. 80% was now ESG issues. And only 20% was being audited by the great auditors of the world. And I said, unless you can get your auditing standards to start auditing these ESG matters, you're going out of business.
Absolutely.
That's what's going to happen. And I said, the profession, most auditors are accountants. I said, you've got to change. And so I said, you should be called chief value officers, because you are the one. You've got the training. You've got the good stewardship of business information. You can look at this value creation process, and you can be the leader in the C-suite. And so I wrote the book Chief Value Officer, and the subtitle was Accountants Can Save the Planet,
Wow.
which led to huge debates around the world.
But that's what you're good at, though.
Yeah,
that's what you're good. Plant the seed and get people talking to create energy.
My alma mater, I've started a whole new thinking in the School of Accountancy, Wits University, where I'm situated, and teaching them integrated thinking, and they're value officers more than financial officers. I mean, they can put down the figures, but they've got to show how did the company make this money. And that's why now you've got the International Financial Reporting Standards acquiring the International Integrated Reporting Council, of which I was the founding chair back in 2009-10, and that you had to integrate the financial with the non-financial. You couldn't look at them. I mean, you don't. I used the musical term. It's a symphony of the functions, the operations, and the numbers. They're put together. You don't, when you play a symphony, you don't have the trumpeter in one room and the violinist in another building. No, they're all together, and you play. And what happens when you make Coca-Cola? Operationally and functionally, the internal auditor, etc., and the marketing manager making sure that they don't have this mad allegation, which has never been proven against Coca-Cola, that Coca-Cola is the result of obesity of children in America. I mean, so they're dealing with all that. To call them chief financial officers is an absolute misnomer. And IFAC, the International Federation of Accountants, agreed with me. And now universities around the world, and Audencia, which happens to be the oldest business school in the world, 128 years old in France, teaching CVO, Chief Value Officer. They got a CVO MBA.
Which is fabulous. And that's a result of one of your seeds that you've actually planted. You've done phenomenal contribution to this planet from the time you've been, in terms of humanity, in terms of corporate governance, in terms of individuals, though. And I'm a beneficiary of one of them, so I'm thankful to that. And I just want to share about this incredible man. There was a woman, his PA, at some stage, that he saw her to be so incredible. She was in her 40s at that stage, ensure that she completes a legal degree, becomes an admitted attorney, and now she's practicing as an attorney. So when he sees people that have the potential to be better, he encourages, he supports, and he helps. And he's done that with quite a few incredible women. So the reason that I love you so much, Judge King, is besides your incredible brain, besides being the first at everything, like you're not afraid, you'll walk into a boardroom and you have the courage to speak. You don't tell people what they want to actually hear. You are sought after. And you are such a, when people are aware, there's so much they could learn from you. And if people just follow a few of your steps, this world will truly be a better, kinder, more knowledgeable, and a better place to be in, actually, from a climate perspective, from a people perspective, from corporate governance perspective, from employment perspective. I mean, look at our country, right? The unemployment rate is so high. If people, both in the private sector and the public sector, took accountability for what they are supposed to do and was effective in actually the production of that and was principally based, we would not be in the position that we actually are. I mean, ethics is not on the top of our radar when it comes to our government organizations, even though they get taught all of the principles. Would you agree, Judge King?
Well, I think I think South Africa is a country that has everything from a point of view of weather, of minerals, of land,
Mm-hmm.
from an agricultural point of view, beauty, tourism.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We have one of the most beautiful countries, and I've seen in every country in the world. And the Cape, to me, is still the most beautiful place in the world. And it is. Cape Town is, I think, the most beautiful city in the world. And so we've got, from a physical point of view, everything. It's a question of what people did. So we had these crazy apartheid laws, to which I was opposed, and I wrote about it, and then we had our first democratic election in 1994, and the political party that won was the African National Congress, as you know. And it was unfortunate that the African National Congress, from liberators, saw opportunities, not all of them, but some of them, saw opportunities to make money, but huge amounts of money, through a whole new word called tenderpreneurship. They they were entrepreneurs who got tenders, but from the inside told how to tender and what to tender, and got these billions of dollars on contracts, and gave kickbacks all over the place. And then we landed up with the president, Jacob Zuma, and the allegations in the Zonda Commission report is that he set about, with the Gupta family, and he set about hollowing out our institutions. So he got rid of the leader in the South African Revenue Service. So people that were stealing effectively money from the state and from you and me as taxpayers never paid tax. He hollowed out the police. He got some puppet to head up the police. So the police would never investigate Charmaine for doing something wrong.
Oh, they'd investigate me, but not the people that needs investigation. Let's be clear.
And then he hollowed out the National Prosecuting Authority. And so he had puppets there who were, this is all in the Zonda Commission, all these allegations. They still have to be proven, but there's a weight of evidence. So they've issued it. The report so far is this thick, and the final installment still coming out. So, I mean, just terrifying reading. It's called state capture. How do you capture this family, and with the assistance, it is alleged, of the president and his political cronies in the cabinet, hollowed out our institutions, so they acted with impunity.
Yeah.
And
you know,
and some of those people are still around, and they still haven't been charged. And so, I called it a tsunami of corruption.
Yeah.
It is so huge that you could take the best minds in the world and put them in charge of the NPA. They couldn't. You wouldn't have enough courts to prosecute, and prosecutors and judges. Other thing and that. So you have to pick and choose. But the thing is to pick and choose the big ones and really nail them. And they haven't done it yet. So let's see what happens out of the Zonda report.
Wow.
Judge King, I think you and I know the reason as to why they haven't nailed the big ones yet. Because, I mean, besides that tsunami we're talking about, there's going to be another one. It's going to unfold, and people are going to...
It's going to unfold. We've got our new president, Mr. Ramaphosa, has said he's going to renew. That's his word. He's going to renew the ANC as a political party. He's going to renew government, renew the way they operate.
He's been there for forever, from deputy president to president. He had enough opportunity to change the minds and actually change the landscape. He's failed to do it. And I'm not being disrespectful to him. I've actually told him this on a platform previously, that he's not courageous enough to be able to lead us out of trouble. You cannot be a yes person. You need to make decisions, and you need to take whatever consequences come with it. I know.
Leadership
Absolutely.
takes courage. And,
Absolutely.
I know that.
I see it.
I've led companies and made decisions. I've had death threats.
Corruption, and we have everything, but the corruption has actually robbed us of a lot. I think that's the point you were driving.
We've got South Africa from a natural point of view. It's got every asset that one could want in the country. And unfortunately, the failure has been bad governance. That's what's actually happened in South Africa. It's bad governance. And the belief that you can legislate for honesty is in fact something you cannot do. And so we've got enormous amounts of legislation for directors and managers of our state-owned enterprises, which make up a large part of our economy, as you know. And they spend, so they tell me, many I've spoken to, up to 60% of their time on conformance, ticking boxes, checks and balances, with a 5-year prison sentence as a sort of Damocles hanging over their head, unless they tick all these boxes. So you've got 60% of time of people who should be working for me as a taxpayer in South Africa, mindlessly ticking boxes, 60% on conformance instead of performance.
Yeah.
And that's where you've got a problem. And then I'm just telling you as a corporate lawyer, I know you can get around a rule much more easily than get around something that is mindful and outcomes based. Because you look at the end result yourself, you can be the judge of that. You don't just look at ticking a box. I mean, for example, black economic empowerment, to try and get more people of color into the business world. Black economic empowerment has been abused. I mean, if, for example, you get extra points because you've got more female shareholders than male shareholders, well, you put your wife and your daughter earning 99% and you earning 1%, and you tick the box, female, majority shareholder.
The legislation
becomes mindless. And when you've got these rules, and hence the development of this tenderpreneurship, where the tenders, where the regulations are, you've got to make sure that this is in paragraph form and double spacing, and you've got to make sure this is in quotation marks and everything. And so I'll put in a tender which is perfectly legitimate and everything, and you'll put in a tender, Charmaine, but you've got an inside track, and you in cahoots with someone inside, and that you're going to share you've charged 50% more than you should, and you're going to share the excess profit with the person inside, and he will reject my thing under Rule 58.2 CZE. You haven't put a comma here, you haven't got a quotation mark there. So the more rules you make, you can see the more absurd it becomes. So, and it's mindless. And then you use that for corruption. You actually use it to work the system. So ethics is a state of mind. How we do things around you when no one is watching us. So Ubuntu is I am because you are. You exist. I exist because you're there. And collaboration, which it was shown during the pandemic, that collaboration is one of the most important things in Homo sapiens on planet Earth. Collaboration of scientists did in 9 months, which usually took 9 years. So let's, the accountants and lawyers of the world, collaborate and make sure that that what you're doing doesn't have adverse impacts on society and the environment, that you actually make profit with positive impacts if possible. But if there's a negative impact, have a plan to eradicate or ameliorate those negative impacts. Then you and I, as trustees of a pension fund, can continue to invest in that company.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, we shouldn't invest. And we need to deal with these things with humanity and compassion. I mean, you've got today, over the pandemic, people have suffered huge hardships. Yeah. So as a director of a company, the company has lost money. The employees have been retrenched, etc., etc. You've got to approach the situation, the claims of the stakeholders, on a collaborative, integrated, compassionate mindset.
Yeah.
Likewise, the stakeholders have to look at the company and understand the hardships the company has suffered. So we come together. Sustainable Development Goal 17, I always say the United Nations made a mistake, should have made it Sustainable Development Goal 1, collaboration. We get together and collaborate and make sure that that company survives. So we get from survival mode to thrive mode in 2-3 years' time.
Yes.
Because if you let that company go into bankruptcy, into liquidation, human capital is dispersed.
Yeah.
The infrastructure is sold for 100th its true value in this present market. This is
sure.
A market to sell things on auction, for example. So you try and get the thing to survive with this humanity, this compassion, this collaboration, where you work together with stakeholders, and stakeholders understand the hardships of the company, and you come to some collaborative understanding. And it's fascinating to me that in 2019, when I still travel physically, I gave a speech in London where the executives of the ESG space became more important than the financial space. So 80% of the makeup of the market cap of companies were these ESG factors. And investment houses were focusing on them, like BlackRock.
Yep.
Yeah.
$8 trillion waiting for investment. But Larry Fink from 2016 started writing and said, well, ESG is becoming more and more important. We have to focus on this. And so they did, as a huge investor. And now in the capital markets of the world, if the three of us are directors and we issue a bond with a particular coupon and it goes into the capital markets of the world for testing for 10 days, the big asset owners and asset managers don't only do a financial due diligence today, they do an ESG due diligence. And how do they do it? They do it on the outcomes basis. Let me see, and let me go there and start asking the community in which you operate, what is your trust and confidence level in this company? What do you regard as the legitimacy of the operations? Are they actually creating value in a sustainable manner? Or what are the adverse impacts on the environment? Oh, there's this. What are you doing about this? And so you do an ESG audit of the company at the same time. And so in the capital markets of the world, huge pressure on companies. So companies have to today, in my judgment, have an agenda item at board meetings, supply chain. Because a company listed on the New York Stock Exchange, if their main service provider, for example, is using child labor, and that becomes known, the next day they lose 40% of their market cap on the day.
It is through your talks and through your work and through your books, Judge King, many people have become more aware of the way they should actually live and what the actions actually have on the planet and society and in the world as a whole, right? I mean, Ed, if I can just say, I'm vegetarian now, besides seeing a goat on the 21st of March 2010, is as a result of some of the talks Judge King had used to land with regards to how 1 kg of meat takes so many liters of water and things of that sort, and just a conscious way of living. So what I extract from you, Judge King, when you listen to you, take all the information, digest it, and see what your actions have on the environment, people, and just life as a whole. We need to get more people to be more aware I mean, collaboration, right? And you just mentioned the power of collaboration. We asked the question as to why people don't do it. Is it as a result of lack of knowledge, or being unaware of what the actions, the ripple effects and things of that sort, or a don't care attitude? What is your take on it?
No, it's again back to the question of self-interest.
Okay.
That when you're acting, and I'm talking about limited liability companies, you've got this incapacitated, totally innocent. I mean, would you do to a 5-year-old child that got injured in a motor car accident, became incapacitated of mind for the rest of his or her life, and you're appointed as the guardian of that child? Would you do to that child what you're doing to a company where you're making decisions which are adverse to the interest of this incapacitated company, which is the most important person in society?
Sure.
You wouldn't do it to a 5-year-old child, but you do it to a company.
Yeah.
And
It's
you're actually stealing from society. You're actually stealing from all your peers, your best friends, your family. So it's a question of coming out as conscious leaders. And I've got this change in thinking in the universities and business schools around the world now, that you've got to teach not only about dollars and cents and adding 1 + 1 = 2, and making sure the debits equal the credits and having a balance sheet that balances, etc., etc. It's you've got to have this mindset of looking at things through the 3 prisms of people, planet, and prosperity. And it's a matter of humanity.
sure.
It's humane. And there's no planet B, there's only planet A. There's nowhere. I know Elon Musk wants to go to Mars. Well, let him go to Mars. But I'd prefer my great-grandchildren to live on planet Earth. But the question is, will there be a planet around for us? I mean, just look what's happening with the Ukraine war. I mean, we for 2 to 3 years, senior executives took their eye off the climate change ball. So the IPCC has said that we've fallen behind in our timetable, to try and get the world right from a climate change point of view. So we've got to focus on it now to try and catch up, because we've got certain deadlines to meet by 2030. So if we don't meet it, then your grandchildren, great-grandchildren may not have a planet by the end of the century.
It's actually scary. It's extremely scary, and people are not taking it as seriously as they ought to, actually. Judge King, I have 2 questions. I have 1 question for you, and then I think
question, and then I'm going.
I know. We love you to the moon and back. You know that. And we're grateful for your time, and we know how precious it is. You've been around the world. And you've written multiple books, like the 6 books on corporate governance, and we'll list it actually under your CV when we upload all of this, so people can have access to the wealth of knowledge that you have. Which country, in your opinion, I know Ed asked the question in the beginning, is which country you enjoyed the most. Which country is the most compliant and ethical, and why is that, in your opinion?
That's a very difficult question to answer. I've never applied my mind to that, actually. I mean, there are countries that are well run by their political leaders, and their companies are well run by their corporate leaders.
Sure.
Well run in the sense that the politicians make sure they act in the best long-term interests of the citizens of the country, not their political party. And no, because that's exactly what happens.
Yeah.
And that the corporate leaders act in the long-term best interest of the company, and not their shareholders or some other, or self-interest, and get kickbacks or whatever it is. So very difficult to say, but a country that impresses me is New Zealand.
There's a woman president, that's why.
Yeah. So,
well, you're just amazing. Judge King, you were saying?
Very, very difficult to judge countries, and it's
Yeah.
difficult to judge corporations.
Yeah.
Who are the top
Understandable.
corporations in the world?
So, Judge King, one final question from me before we wrap it up. Thank you for so much wisdom that you've and knowledge you've shared with us. What do you? I mean, you got a long storied career. You've done so much. You've changed so many thought processes, the way people think. When the time is done, what do you most want to be remembered for?
For changing the thinking of corporate leaders, because my life has been around the corporation. Changing the thinking of corporate leaders to realize that they've got to be conscious corporate leaders, that they are the conscience of the company. They are the mind of the company. They are the soul. It's fascinating to me that in 1844, at a time when the UK government was about to pass the statute to create this limited liability company, this artificial incapacitated person, Lord Thurlow, a clergyman, said, "Who are we? Only Almighty God can create a person. Now you're creating a person without a heart, without a mind, without a soul, without a conscience, that has no body to be kicked, no soul to be damned, and cannot even be charged for treason." Lord Thurlow was right.
That was absolute. That was great. Go ahead, Charmaine.
Judge King, you are incredible in so many levels, and
You use one of my other titles for a change.
No, I just love Judge King. I just love it. Dr. King, Professor King, Chairman. I mean, you are just incredible. I mean, your mind, the way you think, the way you impacted the world. For me, you are a change maker on multiple levels, and many people can attest to that. I'm just grateful. I'm grateful that you walked this earth, actually, for the impact that you've actually had, and the things that you do to save the earth and humanity and people, and for your voice and your courage. I am so. Thank you. Thank you. That's all I can actually say.
That's a good legacy, change maker.
You are a change maker.
Exactly.
And you continue to change the world. Can I tell you, Ed, Judge King, like before COVID, he is in Paris this week and Australia in next week and in Ghana in the next week. He just traveled, making an impact in so many places. And he's just sought after. You know, when people say, I'm a global international speaker, this is a global international speaker. Like, with the knowledge and the wisdom. We wish we had more time to tap into all of that.
Yeah.
Thank you. So grateful. Love you.
Thank you, Professor King. I'll change it. I thank you, Professor King, for all that you've done for humanity.
Thank you very much.
We really appreciate it. This has been another Ubuntu Connected conversation with the Honorable Judge King, Professor King, Chairman Emeritus. You've just done so much, and we thank you. Tune in next time. Until then, we love you. Wish you well. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Goodbye.